The fourth son is a pivotal episode in the lore of the series, and the first writing credit for longtime scribe Howard Lakin. Lakin would go on to write 24 episodes of the series, but his handling of the beautiful and awkward moment between Jock and Ray is probably his best moment. JR is cackling on the inside over the sinking of the bullock oil tanker that was carrying Bobby's much-needed oil. Bobby blows it off, saying it's a minor setback and it was insured anyway. Ellie puts an end to the bickering before it can get out of hand.
Well, that's enough. Talk won't raise that ship.
It actually is a pretty big deal since Bobby gave his word that he would have the oil on time for Brady York's gas stations. But Bobby reiterates his promise to deliver the gas on time.
I said you're going to have that oil, and you are, and on time.
Sue Ellen and JR celebrate Bobby's misfortune poolside.
Is it my fingernails making you hum that little song? Or is it Bobby's predicament?
A little bit of both, honey.
Sally Bullock interrupts with a call, making a date to celebrate their evil plot, which triggers Sue Ellen nosing around. Ellie asks Jock to intervene and help Bobby out, but Jock says it's sink or swim since Bobby wanted to do this all on his own. And if he can't do it on his own, he's not the right man for the job.
As far as I'm concerned, Ewing oil needs a strong guiding hand.
Bobby does try to solve the problem by busting out the old Scroogey and double-crossing his dad's friend, who operates on a shoestring budget. See, Bobby is the nice guy because when he screws his friends over, he feels bad about it. Ray comes home to find the creepy old man from the previous episode hanging out at his new home. The old coot introduces himself as Amos Krebbs, Ray's real daddy.
I'm Amos Krebbs, son. That's right. Your long-lost daddy.
Amos admits he doesn't really care about Ray or his mama, but Ray is close to money now, so he's slithering out of the woodwork.
Well, things is different, ain't they?
Amos wants money for putting in nearly 3 years of child rearing, so Ray gives him the universal Ewing insult denomination of $100.
Do you mean to tell me that you want money for Pamela? There's 100.
And inflation during the Carter years must have been hell, because Amos turns down the Pamela money and gets kicked off the property. Mitch shows up during cocktail hour and meets the family, but he really just wants to tell Lucy he's going to give it a go, provided they do it on his income with no help from her. Pammy gets further separated by the mistress that is Ewing Oil, as Pamela keeps pushing for the third option to Bobby failing or making his friends miserable. Quit Ewing Oil.
Everything was going fine up till now, and I can't back out as soon as I hit my first snag.
Bobby continues to put the screws to local oil dealers to try to make his promised delivery, but Mort Wilkinson storms in and tells him that Bobby's actions will ruin him.
I love my company. I do. I ain't got a wife, no kids, so it's my life, and I don't want to lose it.
It's here where Bobby comes across as the biggest heel in the family, despite JR's actions over the past few seasons. We get no indication that JR ever considers his actions wrong or immoral. In fact, he sees himself as justified in the self-defense of his company.
Isn't anybody going to say something like, "Thank you, JR, for making us billionaires"?
And in the Darwinist moral code his father shares with him. And he assumes the rest of the boys in the industry. Bobby knows better, but he's doing it anyway. This is a great little twist of the knife from Howard Lakin, as it exposes that these aren't just faceless corporations that will write it off on the balance sheet. Some people actually did put their whole life into building a small company and being content with that. Now Bobby is going to destroy a man's life's work, so his dad will be proud of it. Oh, I see what he did there.
What else do you want from me?
Elsewhere, Amos Krebbs tracks down Jock Ewing for coffee. I love that Jock is already annoyed before he even knows who this guy is. Amos drops some exposition for the audience.
Margaret Hunter. You were in love with her, weren't you, Mr. Young? I know she was in love with you. She never let me forget it.
Jock had an affair with an army nurse named Margaret Hunter during the war. Jock says that's old news. He told Ellie, and Ellie knows that Ray Krebbs is Margaret's son. That's when Amos drops the paternity hammer on Jock.
I'm not Ray's daddy. You are.
Jock is skeptical, but Amos produces Margaret's diary in which she pines for a reunion, but she refused to break up the happy family. Amos is under no such moral restrictions, though. He wants Papa Ewing to set him up with his own plot of land, or else he'll spill everything to Ellie and the boys. I should point out that despite the odious nature of the character, actor William Wyndham does a masterful job of making him appropriately sleazy and memorable, with just enough pathetic charm to understand his motivations. Bobby gets torpedoed by the insurance company. It turns out that the Bullocks only insured the tanker, not the oil that was on board. So Bobby won't even get the insurance money to cover the lost oil. Oh, and it doesn't matter anyway because there will be an investigation into the oil tanker's demise since there was so little oil spilt on the surface. Seems awfully suspicious. Like maybe someone wanted to make it look like there was a big oil spill. Especially since the oil tanker was insured for double its worth.
Connie?
Yes, sir?
Call Eugene Bullock and tell him I'm coming over.
We check in with Cliff and Donna. Cliff is ecstatic to hear that Ewing Oil is in so much trouble. Donna notes that Cliff certainly has the town wired. She delivers it with a slight undercurrent of disdain, but that's unfair coming from someone who is so politically entangled herself. Bobby storms over to the offices of Petro Santa Claus to conduct his own investigation.
What happened is I'm out 18 million plus unless I can figure out what the hell you're up to.
Bullock says it would certainly be in character for his wife to get up to chicanery. E.J. Andre's amused reaction to his wife's felonious actions is rather charming.
Oh, she's a very vigorous woman.
Did she do another felony? That little scamp. But all of that is preamble to the reason for this episode. Jock and Ray have a sit-down that is Jim Davis at his gruff best. He runs the gamut of emotions on this one, from angry nostalgia to angry bluntness. Okay, that sounds like a joke, but a really good actor will let the emotions simmer underneath while the surface often remains unchanged.
Ray, I don't know how to put this, so just spit it out. He's not your daddy. I am.
That is one of the most Jock Ewing deliveries you will ever hear, topped only by a pretty famous one later in the season. None of this is to short-sell Steve Kanaly's tearful reaction to the news. Ray offers to take the secret to his grave in order to avoid hurting Jock and Ellie.
Jock, I'd be proud to be recognized as your son. But you know what kind of problems that could cause for you and your family. I want to do what's best for you. That's all I care about.
A quick look at the Bullock books reveals that the first oil tanker did indeed sink, but a second oil tanker, actually filled with oil, arrived safely in the holding harbor in Corpus Christi. Ellie interrupts Jock, who is on daytime chupacabra watch, to ask him what's wrong.
Jock, tell me what's bothering you. I'd like to help.
Take a long time.
I have the rest of my life to listen to you.
I love you, Ellie. I always will.
Amos comes back to rub Jock's $10,000 bribe in Ray's face. He also tells him that he did Ray a favor. Ray's practically royalty now. More on that in a bit. Amos gleefully drives off into the sunset and out of our lives forever. Bobby shows up at the address Mr. Eugene gave him and finds Sally alone in her sex pad. I love the touch of her having an off-the-books love nest that Eugene isn't supposed to know about, but he does and he just thinks it's cute. She tries to seduce Bobby into letting a little fraud go between friends, but he rebuffs her and demands she sign over the hidden oil to him and drop her insurance claim. Bobby tells JR he saved him once again because if Sally had filed that claim and JR was an accomplice, it would have dragged the whole company down in a fireball of a fraud investigation. Before the two can come to blows, Ray walks in and breaks it up. Jock explains everything and welcomes Ray to the family, triggering a great twitchy reaction from Larry Hagman. And for some reason, no reaction shot from Lucy. And we're out. I call this series Shakespeare in a 10-gallon hat because of the obvious influences of Shakespeare on the narrative. King Lear, a story about a king whose decision to split his kingdom among his daughters, is the most direct and obvious. But recurrence of foundlings and concealed parentage in the show is a theme that Shakespeare revisited almost as much as cross-dressing. The fourth son most resembles The Winter's Tale, in which King Leontes suspects his wife Hermione of cheating on him and banishes her child to the wilderness. The child, Perdita is found by a bohemian shepherd and raised in a provincial lifestyle. She falls in love with the prince of another country and is forced to flee because the king doesn't want his son marrying below his station. Of course, the couple return to Perdita's home country, where her true lineage is revealed. Okay, so it's mostly just the parentage and the ranching that cross over, but you have to admit, this kind of thing happens a lot in both Shakespeare and Dallas. And yes, it does introduce an extra ick factor to the Season 1 relationship between Ray and Lucy, but honestly, that was at ick capacity already. What I love about this episode, and I do love this episode, is Ray and Jock's easy relationship. There's a moment when Jock arrives at Ray's place to tell him about his paternity where Jock praises what Ray has built for himself, and he reminisces about building a home for him and Ellie. And then Ray, who is frequently shown to be shirtless on the show when he's working, puts a shirt on and tells Jock to come in out of the sun. It's a nice subtle moment that demonstrates Jock's admiration for Ray's simple ambitions and Ray's reverence for Jock. It's something that goes unexplored given that, spoiler alert, this is Jock's last season, but Ray and Jock have always had a bond that in some ways surpasses those of his other sons. Obviously, Gary and Jock never really bonded. Bobby's strict moral code and willingness to defy Jock always put up a wall between them, and JR spent so much of his time chasing Jock's approval that he never really felt connection.
What else do you want from me?
On the other hand, Ray, probably because he was not raised a Ewing, had none of the pressures of the family name or legacy. He was the perfect mix of Southworth, someone who lived off the land, and Ewing's strength. It's hard not to think of Ray whenever you hear Ellie describe Gary or her father.
Gary was always a cowboy among my sons. He really loved this ranch, like I do.
It's that same Gary but without the baggage makeup that explains the bond between Jock and Ray, and why Ellie later resents Ray so much. The B-plot actually takes up more screen time this time out, with Bobby trying to outmaneuver Sally Bullock and JR, and ultimately it is compelling because Bobby is so steadfast in keeping his word. Just storming into the office and demanding to see evidence of malfeasance doesn't exactly position him as the world's greatest detective or anything, but it is satisfying enough when he slams the metaphorical door in Sally Bullock's scheming face and saves the day for Wilkinson and Ewing Oil. Everyone wins in Bobby's world.